Hey, welcome back. This is Carlos, and we're going to talk today a little bit about 5 ways to make him love you. Well, not forcing him, as you're going to see. Shelly was a woman that I had been coaching for a few weeks. She got on our regular group coaching call, and she blurted out, even before I had a chance to start, she said, "Carlos, do these tricks work?" And you could tell she just had this urgent tone in her voice, like she had to know if these tricks worked. And I was taken aback. I was thrown off by her question, quite honestly, and I hesitated, and I said, "What do you mean by tricks?" And she said, "You know those rules that manipulate guys and get them to love you, the tricks you read about in the magazines?" "Well," I said, deciding to use this content for the start of our call, I said, "Yes." And I think she literally gasped along with a few other women. "But," I jumped in hastily, "not if you're using them for evil." And this, of course, was met with a few chuckles. Let's be clear about one thing right up front. You can strongly influence a guy to fall for you. You can get him to feel like you two were meant to be. However, literally forcing a guy to make him love you isn't very likely if you're just looking to bend him to your will. That being said, let me share with you that you can influence the process a whole lot more than you might think. Emotions are something they can cycle and they can change over time, but you can put a little push behind them if you know the secrets of love. Now, I spent over 20 years informally studying the psychology of attraction, and I came to a realization. You can stimulate a person's attraction and desire for you using some very basic psychological principles. Now, it's not mind control, but it's as close as you're likely to get to bending them to your will outside of one of my advanced programs or seminars, of course. So what I'm going to do is share some of the strongest methods for getting him to fall for you that I know about. Just remember that when you seek to manipulate him to meet your need to feel loved, it's going to backfire on you. Your desire has to come from a place that makes it a win-win for both of you. That's my win-win rule of love. If you want him to love you, are you ready to love him back just as much? Maybe even more? All right, well, let's jump into my 5 ways to make him love you with make him fall for you. Tip number 1, use your eyes. Now, there's all that stuff about eyes being the window to the soul, of course. In fact, whole movies have been made about this topic. Some of them that use the eyes as the theme of the story and the symbol of a person's soul. There's one movie, I can't remember the name of it, but it was basically about the scientist who was trying to prove that the pattern in the iris of your eye was actually an indicator that's unique to the soul. In other words, it'll never be repeated unless that person has the same soul as somebody who died and came back. It was a really interesting movie. I personally believe that the eyes are a spiritual center to our lives. We focus so much meaning on those 2 tiny little orbs that there has to be something to their power, right? When you look at someone and you know they're looking at you, it changes everything. If you were up in your head, bam, you're right back in the moment. If you were disconnected, you'll feel instantly reconnected to that person. That's the power of our gaze and our vision. If you spend a lot of time making consistent eye contact with him, after a while, his subconscious mind will start to trigger some primal responses to you. Constant eye gazing is something that we only do with people that we're in love with. But the cool thing is that our minds also work backwards on this. If we spend a lot of time looking into a person's eyes, our emotions assume that we must be attracted and in love with that person. So if you can engineer a lot of eye contact into your conversations, this will connect you on a basic and primal level. Make him love you. Tip number 2, share his interests. Now, I'm sure you've heard this one before, but it falls in line with the psychology of the eyes that I just talked about. For a woman, connection is created through shared emotions and verbal exchange. For men, connection is created through time spent together. That time can be sitting on a porch, running a race together, or just playing Scrabble. For men, their bonding is the sharing of time. Consider advertising, which repeats brands and slogans and images until you can't remember why you drink Coke or why you use that fabric softener. In a pinch, you'll go for the one that's the most familiar, the name that you've heard the most, right? Love relationships work in much the same way. So use this to your advantage, even if you don't quite understand why. The more times you're around him and near him, the more he will just assume that you're a part of his life. I've known more than my fair share of friends into lovers couples that have found that particular path into love. Now, make this guy fall for you. Tip number 3, disappear or take a sudden right. Timing is the most important part for this tip, since you don't want to use it too early or too late. The best time to pull a Houdini and disappear, or at the very least back off, is right before the peak of the emotional high, right before the early part of the relationship and the things start to settle in a little bit, and then the intense emotion peaks start to lessen out a little bit. You kind of sense that zone in a relationship where things are starting to get not ordinary, but just a little bit more regular. Remember, the reason to do this is to remind him of how much he appreciates the time he does spend with you. And that's why you want to take some time to pull away from him a little bit. Human beings are easily jaded, and we all start to take another person for granted after a time. What I mean by a sudden right is when you make a decision to do something distinctly different than your normal pattern. Just do something a little different, enough to throw them off a little bit. Maybe you usually take your coffee black with no sugar. And today you have them go get you a Starbucks double latte or a chai latte tea. What you have to do is shake up the status quo from time to time. Inconsistency is a good way to keep him on his toes. Get him to fall head over heels in love. Tip number 4 is let him rescue you. One of the ways in which today's culture has strayed significantly from the way men and women naturally come together is that women are more likely to want to express independence. They want to demonstrate they are just as empowered and capable as a man. And there are 2 problems with this being a woman's first approach. Number 1, men already know that you're capable. We've always known it. In fact, it was never in doubt. What many women don't realize is that any interference in your independence coming from him is not because he's threatened. It's because of, number 2, men need to help women. It's part of our biological programming. We need to be useful to you. Unfortunately, today's culture has convinced women that they should never, or rarely, let men help them. And this is a death blow to attraction. If you want to crush a man's heart and tell him basically that he should go look for love somewhere else, just tell him, I'm fine, I can handle it. A few too many times and he will go look for it somewhere else. Yeah, like I said, he knows you could do it. The point is that your man needs to provide for you and you need to let him do that. If you take that away from him, his love will fade until he finds a woman who knows how to let him help. And finally, how to get him to fall in love. Tip number 5, joke, laugh, play. Something happens in a woman's life around the age of 30. Psychologists have identified that women get serious at around their late 20s. She loses her playful edge and she becomes more about planning and logistics than having fun, bantering, and just having a good time. Men need to have a playful edge in their relationship. Most women don't realize that one of the biggest reasons guys are attracted to younger women, it's the spontaneity, this playful energy. The other side is, of course, that there's the fickle and unpredictable nature of younger women, which actually older women don't realize gives them an edge because that turns guys off big time. If you want to keep his attention and inspire him to fall in love, you have to keep the fun vibrance about you. Laugh with him, play with him, banter with him. The ability to have fun, playful interactions are a key ingredient in him discovering your true level of self-confidence, too. The less confident a woman is, the more serious of an edge she generally has. This is a key signal in his choosing his soulmate. Now, like I told Shelley, you can try to trick a man into falling in love, but it generally won't work. And it definitely won't work for very long. What happens most often is that you lure in a guy who is only vulnerable to having his emotions tricked. And that means he's probably not the kind of guy you're looking for in the long run. But if you're interested in creating real desire in a man, irresistible desire, well, then you need to know how to make him open up to you and lower those walls of resistance. You can do this without any tricks or mind games. If you want to learn more, go on over to datingadviceguru.com/irresistible. That's datingadviceguru.com/irresistible. I'm going to tell you a kind of shocking story in the video on that page about a woman who, well, let's just say the end of her marriage wasn't the end of finding her true love, her true romance, and her soulmate. Go on over to datingadviceguru.com/irresistible and watch that video. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. This is Carlos Cavallo from datingadviceguru.com, and I'll be back again with more love tips next time.